What's up, y'all? Welcome to episode 1 of Southern Draw, your new go-to sports podcast where we cover everything from college football to the NFL and other sports that we consume. We're happy for you to join us on this journey in episode 1. Today, we got a rundown for you of the current status of the transfer portal, new coaches in new places, the NFL draft look ahead, and we got some sleepers for the draft to tell y'all. I'm joined here today with my co-host Rod and our producer Nick. So how are we doing today, boys?
We're doing good. Let's get into it, man.
Excited to be here. Excited to hang out with y'all and talk sports for a little while.
Yes, sir. Let's get into it. So, current status of the transfer portal. When it comes to this year compared to last season, the transfer portal is insanely weak.
Very slow start.
Especially for the spring cycle. The fall, we saw a few more big names go in, which I feel like is probably going to be the norm going forward. But there are people who lose their jobs in spring or don't like their roster spot. So, do you have anyone like in the portal that you think should be highlighted?
Garrett Nussmeier, obviously, he came in to the SEC championship last year and threw for nearly 300 yards, 2 touchdowns against Georgia's elite defense. And we saw what they did to TCU in the national championship, and Max Duggan
body bagged him,
completely destroyed him. So, I mean, I think Garrett Nussmeier is a guy, he's obviously not going to beat out Jaden Daniels because Jaden Daniels is one of the better quarterbacks in the SEC this year. Brian Kelly said as much as this, that it's Daniel's job. It's not really a competition. So I think Nussmeier is a guy who could enter the portal pretty quickly here after the summer, and he could contend for a job at most of the Power 5 schools and really be a plug-and-play guy just with his arm and his skill set. So he's really a guy. He would be great. So he is the guy I think needs to enter the portal sooner rather than later.
And the portal has fared well for quarterbacks, especially ones that have hit the Pac-12. Speaking of the devil, DJ Uiagalelei from Clemson went to Oregon State. We've seen the Pac-12 basically be a rehab facility for other Power 5 conferences. We had Bo Nix, Caleb Williams, Michael Penix Jr., and even Cameron Ward coming from Incarnate Word to Washington State had some pretty good numbers last year. So you got a stacked class. It seems like being out on the West Coast is where to be when you're slinging it. So how do you feel about DJ Uiagalelei?
DJ State, after getting benched at Clemson, he had a hot and cold career at Clemson. And I did think he handled the benching well, which is why I'm still high on him going to Oregon State. We saw last year where Oregon State nearly beat USC at home, and then in the bowl game against Florida,
took Florida to the woodshed,
completely destroyed Florida. So I feel like Oregon State is a program that is they're built to succeed right now, and DJ Uiagalelei
can help capitalize on that window.
He might be exactly. He might be the missing piece. Now, I'm not saying they're going to contend for the Pac-12 or anything like that, but they can give some people a run for their money.
I mean, they can completely mix up and just screw everything up in the Pac-12.
Yeah,
and let alone they're not going to contend for the college football playoff. No. I mean, but to be fair, the Pac-12 is not necessarily open. It's like a little close to it, but there's just so many good teams. I don't see Oregon State going unscathed, but he will improve the quality of play there. And then I think you'll see more quarterbacks in the future, which would be good for Oregon State, become kind of a portal destination school, kind of like you see Chip Kelly did with UCLA. So I think this can help just start the pedal for Oregon State to be able to land more guys like that. And like you said, he handled it very well. And he was talking about how he's able to play more freely at Oregon State rather than under Dabo at Clemson. But I feel like Clemson's offense under Dabo isn't really that strict. They've always kind of allowed the quarterback to do what they want. So that's where I'm kind of like, I don't know, but I think he's going to have a good year at Oregon State. And that's pretty much for the Pac-12. You're going to have a whole slate of quarterbacks.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so obviously players are not the only guys who are in new places. We've got a lot of new coaches too. So we're going to talk a little bit about what we think of some of these guys who are at these new schools and how they're going to fare in year one. So I think we should start off with Hugh Freeze. He's at Auburn now, made the transition to Auburn. It was a very controversial hire, but I think that controversy has cooled off a lot.
It did once he started recruiting. People stopped talking about it.
Yeah. People, obviously, success makes controversy go away. And obviously, the season hasn't started yet, but Freeze has recruited really well. I think they had the number 2 transfer class.
I think it finished at 3.
3?
Yeah.
So,
but the portal's still open now. Technically, someone could come in. They have that TCU wide receiver visiting next weekend, the former 5-star.
Yeah. And then I know Freeze said after their spring game that They were going to be looking to bring in a quarterback. Rumblings of TJ Finley transferring. I don't think that's really a huge loss. He didn't play much at all last year after he was injured against Penn State. So I think Freeze has really got it rolling recruiting wise. The fan base, if they weren't all in already, they're starting to become more partial to him. He's really conducted himself well, I think, so far. I do think the lack of a quarterback, Robbie Ashford is still really raw. And I know Freeze was kind of brought in to develop the quarterbacks because Auburn's had issues with that. But I do think there's still going to be a lack of quarterback play at Auburn in year one under Freeze.
I also don't think that there's going to be a quarterback from the transfer portal coming and going down to the Plains for Auburn. So that'll be unfortunate. But Robbie Ashford, like you said, very raw, very athletic. He kind of does his best when the play breaks down. So, but he's had a lot of accuracy issues, obviously.
Big time.
But for him, if Robbie Ashford can pan out athletically, that's at least, if he just plays well and fixes a little bit of those passes, they could probably win 7-8 games there.
I mean, they beat up the O-line. They've got one of the better running backs in the country in Jarquez Hunter. So Ashford really just has to not make mistakes. But still, the lack of a passing game is just going to hurt Auburn this year. But I do think 7-8 games is a realistic goal in year one under Freeze. So next, I'm thinking we talk about Dion, Coach Prime. Colorado, he's got them rolling, #1 transfer class, right? Looks really good. Obviously, they have Travis Hunter, former #1 overall recruit. Had their spring game recently, completely sold out of season tickets. The energy is really high in Boulder. And I think, Coach Prime is going to get it rolling pretty quickly, but I don't know how quickly. Definitely not in year one.
No.
Their team's very undersized. It's a mismatched group of guys they brought in from the transfer.
When they play teams like Utah, they will get absolutely bodied.
Yeah.
They'll probably steal a game from someone they shouldn't this year, but like you said, they're just very small. And those fans, everything's excited. It's going to be fun. It's kind of like a firecracker flat out of the pan for this first year, but they got to make sure their expectations. I mean, if they win 3 games, that's an insane improvement.
I mean, they were horrible last year, and that's why Dion is there. So 3 games, even 4 games, I think is within the realm.
That'd be a massive improvement.
Be a huge improvement. And I think not necessarily winning right away is okay for Sanders because the media is going to give him. They love him. He's a media guy. He's worked in the media before, and it's really cool to see him at Colorado. So I think the media is not going to be too harsh on him because they're aware that he's going to have time. They know he has to have time. If we get 3 or 4 or 5 years down the road and Colorado hasn't broken 6 wins, then is when you start talking about it.
I don't think he'll be there 5 years down the road. I think this is to vault him forward. This could be like a 3-4 year project. And as soon as that first, where the tide finally turns and he has that like 8 or 9 win season with like a bowl game victory, I think he's out of there to whatever jobs will be open at that time.
As soon as they break through, get a couple upsets, Dion will be on to greener pastures. So next, let's talk about Tom Herman. So old Tom Herman, previously the coach of Texas, is getting another shot at FAU.
Coach Rehab down there.
It is Coach Rehab. It's a very similar hire to when they hired Lane Kiffin. I think it's a big name coach who kind of was controversial a little bit. Didn't quite have success at his previous stops. FAU's Coach Rehab, I guess. So I like the hire. There's that clip of him in the FAU gym that was really funny. He looks like he's lost like 100 pounds. So it's Tom Herman. It's a new day, new man. So it'll be interesting to see what he does and if they have success and he can get another Power 5 job.
That's why it's interesting when you look at FAU because it's not like they've never been like a powerhouse among the group of five schools or anything, but you have to think they have access to some of the teams relative in their conference, besides when they had been with some other Florida teams. But the access to Florida recruits really helps those coaches when they get down there, because even like the 3-star athletes there, they're so much more athletic. Just the recruits from Florida and it helps you if you do catapult to a new job. Definitely. You kind of have some roots down there in the Florida area. So it'll be interesting for Herman if this does end up working out, how he can use this as his stepping stone to be able to go back into Florida and pull recruits to his new destination.
Yeah. Florida is just a hotbed. Power 5 guys that are from Florida love to transfer back to Florida.
Mhm.
So if he can take advantage of that, he can get them rolling.
Yeah, especially with how the transfer portal is now. Just half the country seems to be leaving every year.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
FAU is a hot spot too right now with the way the basketball program did at Final Four.
that's
Final
great
Four.
point.
Tom Herman made a cameo at the Final Four, like you said, Rod. He was almost unrecognizable.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping FAU is going to be a good spot for Herman.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll work out. There's a lot of energy around FAU right now, and he's just got to capitalize on it. So we'll see what happens. But now let's talk about Jeff Brom at Louisville. He's going home. And, he at Purdue, they were never really an elite team.
They had elite playmakers, but they were always a solid team.
Yeah.
They would be the team, obviously the famous Ohio State upset, but they just have a team that they would beat every year that would help them get over that 7-win mark, kind of hit at 8 or 9 a few times, just to vault them to like the tier 2 of their division or in the Big Ten. But yeah, there was nothing really crazy that he did, but he helped maintain the program and kept it solid at the foundation.
Right.
So he didn't hurt the program. He showed that he can beat other coaches or scheme to beat better teams. And now he's going home to a program that desperately needs a boost in the ACC. For a school like Louisville, it has always been a pretty like up and down, but there's always been really high moments that you've been able to see other coaches reach success at Louisville and bring in players like Lamar Jackson to a place like that. So it will be interesting to see him going home. And I think that could also just revitalize the whole culture there. Besides not relative to Scott Frost, but if it does go wrong, it could be something similar to that, to where they hang on to him for a little bit too long.
Yeah, they're too partial to guys like that.
Yeah.
The homegrown guys. Yeah.
I think, though, he'll have success.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you mentioned like bringing in guys like Lamar Jackson. I mean, Jeff Brom brought in so much talent at a school like Purdue. I mean, you have Rondale Moore, you had David Bell. They had several quarterbacks that ended up.
Even Aiden O'Connell, they had
Aiden O'Connell,
the past years. He was a great quarterback, injured a few times, whatever, but he's brought good players in, and he'll definitely be able to do it down there, being closer to the Southeast as well.
Yeah, I agree for sure. And he knows Louisville, and he can sell Louisville, so he will have success. I agree. Okay, so two of the more highly
high profile,
coveted coaching hires. We had Matt Rule and Luke Fickell, both going to the Big Ten, obviously.
Same division.
At Rule at Nebraska, Fickell at Wisconsin. And I do see them as similar. Honestly, both of those programs needed culture changes.
Both traditional college football programs that have always with Nebraska, obviously, the past 20 years have been chippy. They did have the 2010, Ndamukong Suh basically just ran college football.
Right.
But yeah, they'll be fine. I can't wait for that first matchup, though. I don't know whether it's in Wisconsin and Madison or if it's in Lincoln, but that's going to be fun.
Yeah, it'll be a lot of fun. But I mean, like I said, both culture changes. Obviously, Rule built up a program like Baylor. Baylor was kind of destitute after Art Briles left. He came in.
He even did it at Temple.
Yeah, Temple too, that's right.
I got the numbers here. His first season at Baylor, 1-11. His first season at Temple, 2-10. Second season at Baylor, 7-6. Second season at Temple, 6-6.
Yeah.
Third season at Temple, 10-4. Third season at Baylor, 11-3.
Yeah.
He went to two different places, both completely just down tremendously, and basically the blueprint was almost the exact same.
Yeah. And I think that's why Nebraska brought him in. Aside from the tenure in Carolina for Rule, which was a little contentious, he really wasn't the right fit for the NFL. But what he did at Temple and what he did at Baylor, that's what Nebraska needs. They need a pure rebuild, a guy that can weather them through the poor seasons, because there's going to continue to be poor seasons.
It's not going to be just an insane flip around, not in the Big Ten. Yeah. I mean, he could have one season, like maybe not this season, but the next season they win like 9 games or whatever, and they'll flatten back out to like 7 than the season prior or after. But there's definitely going to have to be some expectations lowered, because I just think people see this higher, and then they especially some people in the media will do it, or just casual fans, they'll be like, okay, Nebraska's, but if they're not back this year with Rule, then it didn't work. Because everything's so on demand now. The first year, if stuff doesn't work, you're almost considered a failure now.
Right.
not how it used to be. I think with Fickle, though, he's going to have more success early
for sure.
and he's going to look like the right hire, but it could taper off back. But he will change Wisconsin. He's going to modernize them, I would say, rather than the traditional just pound the rock and try to stop them from scoring, which they weren't able to stop anyone from scoring for a few years now. But Nebraska, it'll be the long game with Rule.
Yeah, for sure with Rule, and I agree with Fickle. I mean, Wisconsin really has some good talent already, like Braylon Allen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Probably the best running back in the entire country. And then obviously, Wisconsin, I view it as kind of similar to how LSU was when they transitioned during the Joe Burrow years to more of a spread offense. Before they were kind of the same power, pound it, run the rock. That's kind of what Wisconsin has been, and I think they will retain a lot of that identity under Fickle.
But
they've got to
on to it.
They've got to build.
Need a little bit of change in how they run it. Yeah,
they've got to modernize while still retaining their identity. And I think Fickle will be a good guy to do that. It's just unlike Rule, Fickle doesn't have the Power 5 big program experience, so it's just going to be like you said.
That one's going to be.
It may look good because of their talent immediately, but we've got to see the long game. With Wisconsin. Yeah,
especially for recruiting. Yeah. It's not like I believe it was they're at 20 for 2024 so far, which there's still a lot of game to go for the 2024 recruiting cycle, but that's not bad. No, there's still a lot of time.
Not bad at all.
No. So those were the new.
Rule is also the players love Rule. Christian McCaffrey at Carolina, when Rule got fired, was like calling him and was like upset that Rule got fired. And in the NFL, if the players love you, it really doesn't matter that much. But in college, he's gonna have kids, who want to go to the transfer portal after the first year. But if they have that relationship with Rule and really actually like him and care about him, they'll stick around.
Yeah. It's just the difference between NFL and college, and Rule's skill set and the way he conducts himself really tends more towards college. And he's where he needs to be, and I think he was definitely the right hire.
I think the failure in the NFL will help him, though. It kind of recenters everything into perspective, especially getting just publicly fired and basically trashed on. Yeah. So I think that'll help him, though, going forward, and he should have success at Nebraska, but let's not just throw these insane expectations on him.
Got to temper expectations, but I think he'll right the ship. There have been some recent rule changes in college football, quite controversial. I think, Nick, you have those pulled up. Can you read those off? Just kind of give your
I got those. So this is from Ross Dellinger. As expected, the 3 clock changes passed their final hurdle and will be implemented this season. No consecutive timeouts, no untimed down at end of first quarter and third quarter, and the clock runs after first downs except inside of 2 minutes in the half.
So second, fourth.
Yeah, so personally, I don't think these are going to be of too much consequences. Obviously, the big one is the clock running, which could, really, people have been citing it as teams won't be able to come back, but you have the last 2 minutes, they're trying to speed the game up. All of us, we've been to games where you're in the sun and you're dying for like 4+ hours. Yeah. So CBS guy in the red shirt comes out and holds up his clock for
damn red hat
man in the red hat
for commercials. So to me, as long as if this leads to less commercials and faster games without really ruining the product too much, I think it's going to be fine. I don't know.
The product will be fine. It's just going to change how the game is played a little bit, and it's more sped up. And I think with the games going by faster and not all of the clock stop, like it'll help teams pull off more upsets. So I think that'll actually be fun for the game in that aspect, but it's just the commercial part of it is I don't think it's going to limit the commercials because they will put a commercial in anytime they have to. Honestly, if they really cared about the sport, they would not shorten the games. They would have shortened the commercial times because we've literally watched games where team gets the ball, there's a punt, and they go to commercial. First down, run a little bit, and they'll literally go to commercial. Yeah. And then 2 plays later, a punt, and then go to commercial. And you have 6 minutes of commercials and like a minute and a half of game time.
Yeah. I think that really is the big problem with this, is like you're saying, if it was really about the game, they would shorten the commercials. But this just reminds me of in the NFL, the overtime rules for the regular season aren't like the postseason or like college. And it's because they don't want the games to run into the time slot for the next game. because they don't want to mess up their advertising dollar. So I do agree with you there. I think it's a little bit about money. And I mean, it's not going to affect the game itself too much.
Yeah.
It's just the viewing experience. I'm not quite sure if it's going to improve as much as people think it will. The only rule I don't like is no consecutive timeouts.
I hate that too.
I hate it because
It's like
the moment when a coach calls 2 timeouts in a row and the whole crowd just shits on them is amazing. I love that.
Also for
we lose that, but I mean,
the end of a game though, like you can't call, like you have 2 timeouts left and they're about to kick a game-winning field goal.
Yeah.
Like you can't use both timeouts now, I guess. Like for the
Right.
consecutive timeouts, you can't just ice them twice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those are always
I
fun
love
moments.
being iced 2 or 3 times just because you make everybody think about it for so much longer.
Yeah.
But it's about game speed. They want the games to end more quickly because they want to keep the players safer. So that's admirable, but we're going to have to wait for it to be implemented to see how it really affects the game.
It will definitely take time to get used to as well.
Yeah.
Like remembering that it doesn't stop.
Yeah. There's gonna be so many moments where we're screaming at the TV or screaming at the field where it's like, why is the clock
Like running? Yeah.
But I mean, I guess we'll get it. We're used to it with NFL by now, so we'll get used.
It's gonna be kind of like when a new year happens and you're still writing 2022,
Yeah.
it's 2023 until you get used to it's 2023. Then
Yeah.
by the time it's 2024.
Yeah, it's a similar adjustment, but we'll see. I mean, we freak out about these things in the moment, but then it's like we get used to them. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think the big winner, like Matt said, with upsets is service academies who just only run the ball.
Oh,
They're gonna be able to shorten games like
insane.
crazy.
Yeah.
Maybe this makes Army and Navy and Air Force become like perennial powerhouses. Take it back to the 40s and 30s.
We'll see.
Army to the playoffs. You heard it here first.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so now we're going to go ahead and do our NFL draft look ahead, kind of transitioning a little bit from college football. We're going to do our sleepers for the draft. So I'll let you go first with your 2 first sleepers that you got.
Okay, so my first sleeper is Tayshaun Boutte from LSU.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so this is a guy, the last couple years he's had, I don't know if you would call it character issues or he's just had a little bit of an attitude problem, I guess, which is called on and off the field.
Bayou Diva.
Yeah, there was the whole rumor that went on last year with that situation at LSU. And then he announced that he was returning to school and then entered the draft anyway. But in 2021, this guy was an absolute stud. He was one of the best receivers in the country. And you know that from the fact that he wore 7 for LSU last year, and 7 is their like sacred number. So or one of them. They have another one. I think it's 18. But he wore 7. I mean, Derek Stingley wore 7. If Jamar Chase had played in 2020, Pat Peterson, Tyrann Mathieu. So he's a guy who was obviously respected because of his talent and because of who he was at LSU, but things just didn't quite go right. But he's an elite receiver, as is the vein of LSU receivers. So he's a guy that I think you could kind of
definitely worth taking a gamble on. Yeah,
in the 3rd round or so, and he would be a great value pick around there. So that's my first one. My second one is Devon Achane from the running back from Texas A&M. And I actually think that he is going of the running backs, which we'll discuss later. I think he's going to have the most success of this entire draft class. He was really A&M's entire team when he was healthy last year. He was one of the best running backs in the country when he was healthy, just if he can continue to stay healthy. But he is really an all-encompassing running back. He's a great receiver. He's a great runner, extremely fast.
Insane. He's like a 4.32 speed.
Yeah, 4.32. Like he is like a bullet. So he is like what you want in the NFL right now. He's a combination of hands, size, speed, everything.
His blueprint fits perfectly.
Yeah, perfectly.
Especially for certain offenses.
Yeah. So he's a guy who, again, you could get mid-round and he would provide just as much value as someone like Bijan Robinson. They have similar skill sets. Obviously, Bijan is the more highly touted one, but I do think Achane is great value in the mid-rounds.
Yeah, I saw him mocked in the 3rd round of the Dolphins in a mock draft
Yeah.
2 days ago. So I hope that actually does play out.
That speed with Waddle and Hill, I mean,
Mhm.
that would be ridiculous.
You wouldn't know who to guard.
No.
If he stays healthy and you could keep all 3 of them on the field at the same time, it would just be a
It would be
nightmare for
crazy.
defenses. All right, so for my first sleeper, this one is I kind of went out there with this one, but I think it'll be successful. Is Anthony Orji from Vanderbilt, the
Ooh,
linebacker.
Yeah.
He scored high. I think it was like 4th relative overall of all linebackers, just all combined scores. Obviously, smart, played football at Vanderbilt. He had over 100 tackles last year. It was 106. It was his best season, 71 in 2021.
Wow.
But I just think he was the captain of his team. He's a true traditional linebacker, which is kind of like my other sleeper that I have coming up next, which is partially not a sleeper. Both of them are like linebackers you would see in the early 90s and late 2000s or early 90s or late 90s, early 2000s. They're just hard-nosed bruisers. They don't really pass coverage very well. They just run straight at the line and they just body people. With Orji, I mean, that was his strength, was just being so much stronger where people would get caught up on blocks normally.
Yeah.
He would be through, and he's just blue collar, straight running linebacker, basically just like the other one I have is Jack Campbell, who's the number 1 linebacker in the draft. But I think he should be like a top 20 pick.
Yeah.
I think he's one of the best players in this draft. Jack Campbell, I mean, 125 tackles this year, 140 the year before. He's just
a machine.
You know who he reminds me of? Zach Thomas.
Zach
Thomas had a few interceptions and just like Jack Campbell did in college, but he's just, if there's someone in front of you, you will be on your ass.
Yeah.
And that's someone you don't want tackling you. So I think he just fits that. He's going to have to learn how to do well in man coverage because that was his huge weakness. He is big. He's strong. He's fast. He's got a great football IQ.
Yeah.
But he's got to work on his pass coverage. Besides that, he just flat out just pancakes people and runs them over. But Iowa, their defense has always been strong and they produce great players. I think this will be one of the best players in the draft.
Guys like that are so undervalued now because the Kuechly, Fred Warner archetype is more of like a hybrid linebacker safety, which is kind of what the NFL's moved toward. But those big hard-nosed linebackers are so undervalued, and they still fit into the game perfectly.
Even with to make up for the lack in the pass game until they can kind of learn it if they have to, just the amount of pressure they can cause just blitzing, just being an absolute menace at the line can throw off the pass game. If they're not that great in coverage, blitz them.
Yeah, exactly. So that's I'd love to see like Seattle take a guy like that, and they could kind of go under Bobby Wagner, who just re-signed with Seattle, obviously. But you have San Francisco in that division with how run heavy they are.
Yeah,
those guys would fit in so well in that kind of system, and you learn from Bobby Wagner. I'd love to see one of those guys end up there.
That'd be incredible, actually. Have a legend. So who's your next sleeper that you have lined up?
My next sleeper, Jake Haener.
Oh, Fresno State.
Yes, so Jake Haener is interesting because he almost transferred to Washington last year, and then he didn't, which would have been a whole domino effect with Michael Penix Jr., obviously.
I wonder what would have happened if he did transfer to Washington with how Penix went off last year.
Yeah.
If Haener became a Husky, what kind of year or what would his draft stock be looking like?
Exactly. He may be, people may have been talking about him as
instead of Will Levis or stuff like that. Yeah,
exactly. So, but he was the Senior Bowl MVP. He played really well at the Senior Bowl. He's got a great frame. He's 6'4", and he doesn't have the strongest arm, which is why I don't think people are as high on him because everyone's looking for the Josh Allen archetype now.
Yeah,
strong arm and big frame, but decision making matters too. And he's a great decision maker. He threw for whole bunch of yards at Washington, 30 touchdowns. Fresno State.
As all good Fresno State quarterbacks have done.
Right. Well, that's true. But this guy, like I said, he's Senior Bowl MVP. The Senior Bowl staff really liked him. So
if he was healthier, I think he missed like 4 games this past year. If he was healthy all year, it would be a whole different conversation with him as well. I think it would be higher touted into the draft.
Yeah, I agree. But I think he's a good guy. If nothing else, he's a solid, very solid backup in the vein of like Bailey Zappi.
Yeah.
I see those guys as kind of similar. So with what happened with the 49ers, you need a good backup.
Yeah.
So
or two.
Or
the Dolphins.
Or an
entire roster filled with QBs.
Well, exactly. And it was something like the NFL played the most quarterbacks in a season
I saw that,
of all time last year. So a good backup, if nothing else. They're just as
Backups
valuable.
are more valuable now than they ever have been.
Yeah, almost as valuable as a starter. So that's my Jake Haener. I think he's going to be a
Jake Haener.
stud.
I had someone else, but I'm gonna go with this first since he went quarterback. DTR.
DTR.
I just think his skill set, and I just feel like he fits so well into this modern day NFL.
Yeah.
If he was like drafted by a young and upcoming team, or even honestly, I know Cleveland has Deshaun Watson, but I feel like he would fit in well in Cleveland to complement that run game, which isn't going to happen. That's just like a little fantasy. But
he took a visit to Philly as well.
He did?
Yeah, he took a visit to Philly as well. So the Jalen Hurts kind of skill set is very similar with.
He can definitely run the ball as well too. Yeah, but I just think he has a good head on his shoulders. He's a smart player. He proved himself. He was at a place that I think UCLA kind of. I'm not trying to like dog on Chip Kelly and his program, but I think it kind of capped out his development and abilities. Even though Chip Kelly's been great, I just think it's the people he was kind of playing around with, besides Charbonnet, absolute stud. But if he was at another program, like let's just say we flip Caleb Williams and DTR, I'm not saying he's Caleb Williams, but he could have had an exponentially better season. I just think he's a lot better than people give him credit for. So that's my sleeper at the quarterback position.
Yeah, he's a stud. He was always super underrated in college. He was always just not in the top tier of quarterbacks, but right there.
Yeah.
So
he's kind of like a Geno Smith
vibe, a little bit.
Almost.
Yeah, very similar.
I could see that, or maybe Teddy, but Teddy just can't move.
Yeah.
So don't even get me started talking about Teddy Bridgewater. So I got two more. And I'm going to go, they are both running backs. We have Chase Brown from Illinois and Deuce Vaughn from Kansas State, which if you're a college football fan, you most likely know these names, or you should. Deuce Vaughn, I just feel like I'm not trying to go over. It's like it's like a Christian McCaffrey Jr. almost. Right. Just the way his style is played, I think he can fit in well with like an RPO kind. Like imagine if he was on the Eagles.
Yeah, that's a good.
Like him in the backfield would be wild.
Yeah.
I just enjoyed watching him play. I'm biased. He was one of my favorite players in college football. So I had to put him on here. But Chase Brown is another one of the running backs. There's just so many running backs in this draft. But he's just so hard-nosed. He's just an insane running back. He had 1,643 yards, 328 attempts, 5 yards a carry.
Yeah. And in that Sugar Bowl too, he had a like 80-yard touchdown.
Are you talking about Deuce Vaughn?
Oh yeah, Deuce.
No, Chase Brown.
Oh yeah,
no, you're.
Well, Deuce Vaughn had that run, but yeah, Chase Brown the same way. I mean, those guys can break a long run. They're hard.
Yeah, I was about to say this was the stat. Chase Brown's the first Big Ten player to have at least 100 rushing yards in his first 8 games since Ezekiel Elliott in 2015.
Yeah, see, and Zeke now he's fallen off now, but he was a guy who was insanely productive in his first couple of years. So. That's a great pedigree.
Exactly.
So
Chase Brown is super underrated. Our friend AT who went to Illinois, every Saturday he would text me saying Chase Brown is the guy, and no one is talking about him. I think Chase Brown ran a touchdown and then did the Heisman pose like week 4 or something like that. So.
He was. If they didn't I know they had like that good run and it kind of tapered off, but if they didn't throw their quarterback through like 5 picks week 1 against Indiana, his spotlight would have been so much bigger on the season. He deserved to be talked about more, but it's hard when you had a place like Illinois that they kind of just pass off. They're like, just wait for basketball season.
Yeah. With old Burt. Yeah, nobody wants to give old Burt credit, but he had Illinois. A guy like Chase Brown, you just got to give him.
Didn't he coach at Wisconsin too? Before? Yeah, he had Wisconsin rolling. Yeah. Imagine he does the same thing, gets Illinois a 10-win season. What's going to happen there?
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, that's all for my sleepers as well. So.
Or we can move forward then to NFL news, or if you want to talk about Anthony Richardson and Will Levis.
Let's talk about a couple more draft guys. Levis versus Richardson is really interesting. I feel like there's this trend of there's a guy who has a lot of success, so they try to look for that guy.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of that with Cam Newton, and every quarterback that was big and tall and could run a little bit was the next Cam Newton. And now that's kind of what's happening with Josh Allen. Because every guy's the next Josh Allen. And I've heard both Levis and Richardson be compared to Josh Allen. I've heard Richardson be compared to Cam Newton.
Mhm.
I guess I see some of that there with both of them, and they're both really interesting prospects. I mean, obviously Richardson is really raw.
Yeah.
He was on a really bad Florida team this past year and the past couple years, so that kind of hurts your production. But obviously, you saw the flash plays that he had. He had a really long run, several long runs against LSU.
Mhm.
In the win against Utah, the one where he rolled out right,
Should not have won that game.
no. I mean, Utah really blew that game, but
Yeah.
he made a bunch of great plays. The one where he rolled out,
Yeah.
jumped,
Oh, he
span,
saved that game.
and ran it.
I mean,
and
obviously
threw
the
the ball.
in, but
Yeah.
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 I will say though, the runs against LSU, some of those were against like the fourth string defense.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And also the one thing with Richardson that I don't understand is I've literally seen they've said GMs or other people have said that he's a better passer than Cam was.
I did
in
see
college.
that too.
If you look at their like QBRs and relative yards and everything, it makes zero sense. Even if you watch the film, they're like, oh, he's in Florida's practice facility and he just threw the ball 60 yards on air to another wide receiver. People need to stop being so obsessed with like on air. I don't care what you do against air at all. I want to see your actual football clip. Can the kid run? Yeah.
Yeah.
And he can do that. He's an insane athlete. I mean, it may not be as intense. Trey Lance has had much of a chance, but it's almost that rawness to it, or it's almost similar kind of with.
Yeah, they do. That is kind of a similar kind of prospect, those two. But yeah, you're right about the whole pro day thing. It's like the Zach Wilson effect.
Yeah.
He made one great throw at his pro day and was the second pick. And
I'm so glad he was the second pick.
Yeah.
And made the Jets trash. So.
Well, and then the Jets could have had Fields, which I know the debate around Fields is he's kind of the same, just a runner, but I think it's
a lot better than Zach Wilson.
Yeah, he's a lot better than Zach Wilson, and it's kind of misconception that Fields can't throw, but these on-air reps don't mean anything.
But I also think what's funny with I've even given Justin Fields flack for just being, I call him a running back, especially when the Dolphins played him this past year and he just torched us. But all he did was basically run. But if it's kind of like, you saw how the Eagles used Jalen Hurts this year, but they did have an absolutely unreal offensive line.
Yeah.
If Chicago could get a similar line or a stronger line, they could almost kind of do the same thing with Fields.
Yeah, you kind of got to set guys like that up for success, like Richardson. Yeah. Richardson, the first couple teams, if he went to the Texans or the Colts, he would probably be a good fit with the Colts just because I know
how strong their run game is.
Yeah, their offensive line struggled a lot last year, but those guys are still extremely talented.
That was a bad year for them. I just think how everything was going on around that franchise just didn't allow the team to come together in their early season injuries. But that's actually a good point. I could see Richardson actually probably working out pretty well with that run game with the Colts.
But the Colts are also interested in Levis, and I think they're leaning toward Levis. And just being honest, I don't buy into
Will Levis
at all.
The most overrated quarterbacks in a long time since Josh Rosen.
Yeah, he is. He compared to Richardson, he had no flash plays other than the one throw against
Florida. Funny how Florida was okay. So the excuse that I've seen people make is that his Kentucky team was bad. He didn't have a good line. That's why he sacked so much. I was like, if he's such good of a player, I've seen players who are that good, even when their team is that bad, still have flash plays or be able to do other things like Anthony Richardson was able to do with a terrible Florida team. I don't buy into any Levis hype. I don't think he's that great. Honestly, he could be a backup somewhere, and that's fine with him. Honestly, just throw him into a Taysom Hill role.
Yeah, that does seem like the role he kind of fits too. And there's just such a lack of production in 2022 with him. And what sticks out in my mind is the Tennessee game from last year, the blackout game in Neyland at night. I heard so much talk that Levis was going to go in there and show that he was real and that the hype was real. And I don't think I've seen a quarterback play a worse game in a long time. He was totally overwhelmed, looked like he didn't know where he was, made horrible decisions. And I just think if you're a quarterback that can't go into an opposing stadium and put the team on your back like that.
Yeah.
Because
he did
it in the swamp.
It's not that they had to win. It's not like they had to beat Tennessee. Just show yourself. It's not like Tennessee's defense was even that good. Tennessee's defense was their weakness.
Yeah. They got embarrassed, and he got embarrassed in that game. So I just don't buy it. To me, I think he's the media guy. I
That's
have
what
this
you were talking
list.
about, the frame. That's what I was thinking. It's
Yeah.
like they keep saying he has the look or the feel of a quarterback or
Yeah.
all that stuff. I was like, what happened to just like, I mean, it's become like a modern thing, like you said, the Josh Allen effect that's kind of going
Yeah.
on, but like, what happened to just sitting there watching tape and be like, that guy's good? Or, obviously,
That
there's
guy's-
always
yeah, tape
people
can be so
that
good.
come out differently, but I think tape is more reliable than
Yeah.
just, ooh, this guy's got the perfect body. I was like, so have a billion other people that just went.
Exactly. And I just think that it's a trend now, the last couple of years of the media, kind of they select their guy preseason
and they ride him.
They ride him. And they don't, that no matter how he plays that year, he's still their guy come draft time.
Yeah.
I mean, you saw this with Malik Willis, and Malik Willis looked abysmal last year. Jordan Love, which we don't know quite yet about Jordan Love, but he was that guy in 2019. I mean, Josh Allen was that guy at one point, and Josh Allen worked out. But it's more of a common occurrence that the media guy does not work out. So, I mean, Zach Wilson was the same one, and we talked about Zach Wilson. So, I mean, we'll see. Levis could end up being Josh Allen, but I doubt it.
I'll eat crow if I'm wrong, but I do not see him having an NFL career.
I think he's a guy who will be in and out of the league in 5 years.
Yeah.
Okay, so some other draft talk. Lots of running backs, and the position of running backs has really been devalued lately. But I think, especially with a guy like Bijan Robinson,
adaptation of the running back in the NFL is becoming very useful. What was it for the Chiefs? Isaiah Pacheco.
Yeah.
The way he was used this year too. It's just it's basically just a hybrid between a wide receiver. It's like having a slot at running back, basically.
And that's kind of the role that Bijan Robinson fills. I do think
with power too.
Yes, big time power guy. But they fill that role and kind of meet what the NFL is looking for. And it was reported that he's only had meetings with the Bucks and the Eagles, which I can definitely see that as those teams filling that need, because Leonard Fournette's gone. Miles Sanders went to Carolina. So I do expect one of those two teams to take him in the first round.
You said Philadelphia?
Yeah, Philadelphia. Yeah.
That would be an interesting offense.
Really interesting. I mean, and that's kind of, they need a running back now.
Yeah.
But is the value there? Running backs
for the Eagles though, with how this draft is, with a lot of running backs, I think almost every running back on this list could complement them. Just the way their offense is.
Yeah. Well, and that's like, I mean, Bijan's not the only one. There's Gibbs, who from Alabama. He fits in that mold as well.
Mini Kamara.
Yeah, then that's the comp a lot of people have given him. I mean, he led Alabama in catches last year, and Alabama is known for having elite wide receivers and running backs, but a running back that's basically an elite wide receiver is not something that's common at Alabama. And he's a guy that would fit into a pass heavy scheme, maybe.
Yeah.
Late second round or early second round.
I wouldn't be surprised to see someone like almost kind of trade, like you see someone jump out of the early third round to come up into the late second round to get him.
Yeah, so maybe like Kansas City to pair him with Pacheco.
Oh my God.
Or like Buffalo to pair him with James Cook.
We don't want anyone going to Buffalo.
But yeah, I mean, they would fit in that type of scheme.
Yeah.
And then a guy, we talked about A-Chain already. Super underrated. He fits that mold as well.
Please, Miami.
Yeah, he would be great in Miami's system with that speed. Like I said earlier, I think he'll be the most successful.
That's fair.
Different kind of running back though, Tank Bigsby.
Yeah.
Tank, Auburn's offensive line has been horrible for years. Was easily one of the worst in Power 5 last year. For example, Bigsby was 236th in yards before contact, and then 12th in yards after contact. So that tells you he's getting hit behind the line
almost every play.
But then 12th in yards after contact after being hit behind the line. I mean, the guy clearly has talent. He's clearly a great running back. It's just, is the value there for him as well? Where do you see him falling?
I saw, I believe his name's Matt Miller, works for ESPN, had him mocked like 108th pick to the Broncos.
So that would be interesting, because the Broncos, who's the Broncos running back right now? Because Melvin Gordon's not there anymore. Oh, it's
for their
from UNC, the UNC guy.
I just went brain dead. I know exactly who you're talking about.
But
Javonte Williams.
Yes.
Yes,
He got hurt last year.
He got hurt last year, and is expected to be back this year.
You know what? They're almost kind of similar style of play.
Type of running backs, yeah. But if you could add someone like Tank to Denver until Williams comes back fully healthy, and then they'd be a good combination.
Yeah, 1-2 punch.
Yeah, Tank, horrible hands though.
That's which is going to be the problem for just in this NFL. You kind of got to be able to catch now at the running back position.
Yeah, Bigsby cannot catch at all, and is really going to hinder him, and that's probably why he's not being mocked higher than he is. But I mean, he's a great running back, so we'll see where he ends up.
Yeah,
but a couple others.
Let's say we already touched with we have Deuce Vaughn, obviously, and Chase Brown, which we've talked about. But I mean, honestly, one guy that's kind of flying under the radar too is Ibrahim from Minnesota. Yeah. I mean, he was their workhorse. He got hurt, he came back, and kind of unfortunate.
Ago, right?
Yeah. He had been their workload. Like, dude is just an absolute animal. Like his feet, his vision, it's like a perfect running back. They didn't necessarily use him. He was just run heavy.
Right.
Like he was almost an every down kind of back, which we're not really seeing much very more in the NFL besides maybe Derrick Henry, really. But that's also because the Titans haven't had a quarterback that can throw in like since Vince Young.
Right.
Well, not even Vince Young, Steve McNair. But he could be almost like an every down back. And I wouldn't be surprised to see him come in next year and almost have kind of like a success kind of like Breece Hall had.
I think they're very similar too. Yeah, kind of their body type is the same.
I think they're two running backs that can kind of come in and take over a game at certain points. And I think that's a good comp. But I think he will be an insanely valuable pick for someone. He could be like a 5th round pick.
Yeah. And that's great value for him in the 5th round.
Insane.
Yeah. He's a great player. Another guy I really like is Sean Tucker.
Syracuse.
From Syracuse. Not only because he has an amazing Twitter account that everybody should check out, but he was he's another great every down back. When you tweet out his statistics, it would always be a great mix of run and receptions. So he's very versatile. I really like him. He's another mid-round pick guy who provides great value later in the draft. So.
You know what I'm interested is if we start to see some teams take running backs and we start to see a few come off the board like back to back or like maybe 3 and like 7 picks, what teams start doing.
Yeah.
And then because you got to think there's some teams who are probably like, we can wait, like I said, with Ibrahim to the 5th round to get a running back. But what if that trend starts and those dominoes start falling? We're like running back, a few picks later, running back. And then like people just start trading up. Some of these guys could be earlier picks than they normally would have, which will be very interesting to see.
I could definitely see that happening. And I do think it is, even though the position's devalued right now, it's such a deep class, and I don't think people realize how deep it is. There will
most of these guys I can see. The problem is it's like there's so many of these guys, but there's not many that's of those spots to necessarily fill. So it's hard to see how they can all be successful at the beginning. But I think this is a class that we could see have like 5 or 6 of them last at least like 5 years.
Yeah, there's several Pro Bowl guys in this running back class. I think I think Bijan Robinson is definitely a Pro Bowl back. I mean, and there's some other guys that I think will surprise us. So, yeah, definitely a deep class of running back. So final segment of the show, NFL news. Jalen Hurts' new contract. The Eagles paid him a massive contract. Kind of sets the market for the rest of the guys. Like Burrow, kind of will help.
I think Burrow will be like way over this,
way bigger. And then Herbert and as well as Lamar Jackson too, because I think people are trying to avoid giving out those massive contracts.
Wasn't like Lamar's first offer from the Ravens almost kind of a little bit similar to Hurts? Though?
Yeah. His most recent one was around $230 million, I think, which is similar to what Hurts is getting. So we'll see how they work out with that.
Get an agent, man.
And Lamar, he remains unsigned. Not much happening other than that new offer. I do think I don't think he'll play for anyone but the Ravens next year. We're just gonna have to wait and see if he holds out or not.
Yeah, that's just gonna end up staying one of those things that people want to keep making a topic out of it. And just drag it out. But I think this is literally just gonna last months.
Yeah.
It's not like it's just gonna fix like that. We're gonna be like, Lamar Jackson just got $2 billion from the Ravens.
Yeah.
They finally folded. Like, no.
Yeah, it'll definitely be dragged out. I think Lamar and the Ravens are both have dug their heels in, but I think we'll get into the season and either he'll play on the franchise tag and leave next year, or he'll sign a long-term deal with Baltimore. But it remains to be seen.
It'd be very hard to not see him playing in Baltimore. I just don't see the fit anywhere else just because of how it's worked there.
Yeah. Jets and Packers have resumed trade talks for Aaron Rodgers as of today. I think Schefter was saying that deal is not imminent, but they hope to have it done by the end of the draft.
Do you think they would do it during the draft? You know, how crazy that would literally take over the entire draft. They would talk about that the whole time.
Yeah, kind of similar to a couple years ago when this first all started with Rodgers. It kind of dropped on draft day that he was basically not happy. So we'll see. I saw a report that said the soft deadline was day 2 of the draft for the trade. So we'll see. I would imagine it gets done before the trade or before the draft starts. I just think that gives both teams the clarity that they need based on what they need to draft. I think Green Bay is not going to want to go into the draft without having capital from the Aaron Rodgers trade.
Yeah, that was my thought too. Because if you're losing literally a monumental player, you want to have as much capital as possible going into the draft.
You got to surround Jordan Love with capital, and you need the capital from the Aaron Rodgers trade. So we'll see. It'll get done soon, I think. And then speaking of that, something similar is the Titans rebuild. I think the Titans are about to go into a extended rebuild. There were some rumors that ended up being untrue, but where there's smoke, there's fire about Derrick Henry being traded to the Eagles. It may not happen now, but I think something in the future, Derrick Henry will be moved. There's also rumored that a lot of teams believe that Ryan Tannehill is available, which his career has been so odd. You obviously know you've been a Dolphins fan, but I mean, I'm not quite sure if he's still serviceable, but
he's like a lesser Kirk Cousins.
Yeah.
It's like he's just gonna sit you in the same spot and you're never gonna move.
Yeah.
Like you were just not moving forward with him at QB1 spot.
Yeah. So we'll see if they move, but there's been rumors that they want to trade with Arizona up to 3, and they may be interested in Stroud.
Trading up to 3?
Yeah, trading up to 3 because they may be interested in Stroud. They may go that route, even though they drafted Malik Willis, but Malik Willis has been a disaster, so I don't think they have much confidence in him. But yeah, we could see the Titans move up to 3. There's several teams I've heard that are kind of interested in 3.
Do you think they'd include, like if they did move up to 3, they wouldn't trade Derrick Henry yet, but they'd include him with that package to get up to 3?
I think it's possible, maybe. It's just if Arizona wants to take on this contract, but we'll see. But speaking of Arizona, new uniforms. I think everybody, I personally, because I wrote about it on the Substack, but I was personally really invested in these. Initially, when they released the new uniforms, I was pretty disappointed because I really wanted the state flag to be included because it's just an iconic look. But the more I look and the more I see people comparing it to their traditional uniforms from the 70s, 80s, 90s, they are pretty faithful. They're like basically modern throwbacks.
Yeah.
Really the only
except
issue,
the black jersey. It's kind of the outlier. The Ohio State look.
Yeah, it is very similar to Ohio State. But it's just like a gimmick that everybody likes. I don't
blackout
like
uniforms.
It. Yeah. But
to be fair, they did have the blackout uniforms before.
So. Yeah, so they just kind of rolled it over. But definitely an improvement over their older uniforms. Their older uniforms were horrendous.
Yeah.
So the only issue is the big nameplate on the Arizona jersey. But other than that, they're a big improvement. So I think once they're on the field, people will like them a lot more.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that helmet pops under the lights too, because it's supposed to be like
flex.
A pearlescent like flex. That'll be interesting.
Let's get into our final thought for the day. Nick, do you want to go first?
I would love to go first. I got 2 things for y'all. Number 1, Josh Allen is currently the most eligible bachelor in America, as he is apparently single now. His girlfriend took out all Bill's stuff, all Josh Allen stuff from her social media. So I'm thinking a big year from Josh, maybe an MVP season, really focus on ball, not worry about all that extra stuff.
Locked in.
locked in. And number 2 is that Vladdy Jr. is the father of the New York Yankees, and he continues to mash in New York.
I'm changing my final thought.
And we love to see the Yankees get embarrassed, you know. So shout out to Vladdy Jr. All the women in Buffalo will be after Josh Allen, so good for him.
I can't remember if this was correct or not, but Josh Allen, didn't he throw the most interceptions in the league this year?
I think it was close. He
Or
was
close?
up there.
So he's just been having trouble maintaining possession of things recently. So
Yep.
let's see how that continues, especially without Dabble still not there. Well, we'll see little Joshy how he does.
We'll
Also,
see.
Bruins in 5.
Bruins in 5. That's your final thought?
That's my final thought.
Yeah, they're kicking ass today. So my final thought is trade Trae Young. We should have kept Luka Doncic when we drafted him, but Trae Young needs to go. He sucks. Rebuild immediately.
Yeah, the take that both teams won that deal is not aging very well.
Sour as rotten milk. Like it's
The Hawks are stuck in a never-ending cycle of the same team forever.
We'll just be. I mean,
Literally.
there's a stat where we were just right below 500 for the entire season.
And it was like winning one game, losing the next game, winning one game, losing the next game, just over and over and over.
So just blow it up. Who cares? Send Trae Young to Egypt. Who cares? End it. Just get him out of Atlanta.
Get ready to learn Egyptian, buddy.
Yeah. But that is my final thought. I think that's all we've got for today.
Awesome. Thank y'all for listening to episode 1 of Southern Draw. Hope you enjoyed. If you want to go check out our Substack, give it a subscribe. We got written content on there as well. And we all have our socials cracking out content as well moving forward. Thank y'all for listening.
At
Have a good day.
Southern Draw Pod. We'll see you guys next time.